Good evening, Poultry Keepers, and welcome to another Poultry Keepers 360 Live. We are happy you joined us tonight, and tonight is about an American classic, the Rhode Island Reds. And coming up in just a few seconds, we're going to dive right into it, so stand by. As you can see, we got a full house here tonight. Jeff's here, Carrie's here, I'm here, Jennifer Bryant's here, and Sue Dobson is here. Woohoo! I think it's the first time we've had 5 folks on at any one time, folks.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Carrie, I didn't ask you before the show, but I've got a PowerPoint presentation. Do you want me to do that first and then get to your questions, or how you want to run that, Chief?
Go ahead and do your PowerPoint presentation. I feel like pictures are good at grabbing attention, and we'll see. Yeah, I mean, I feel that it may answer some of the questions.
Okay. I thought it would be kind of neat, particularly since I knew it, to do a little bit of a history on Sue Dobson's bird and where those birds came from and how they came to be. So let's dive into this thing. We'll start with that Schilling Rhode Island Red print, which is just absolutely stunning. One of the best ones out there to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd love to have a tail like that on my bird right now.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
A lot of you may not know, but there is a monument to Rhode Island Reds in Little Compton, Rhode Island, where they were created up in that general area. It's in a little park there in New Compton. And it was actually deeded over to the Rhode Island Red Club of America. And I wish I could get it large enough to where you could read that inscription on there, but I really couldn't. But there's a gentleman in the neighborhood that keeps it up for us and just does a tremendous job. I don't know too many breeds that can say they've got one of those.
Yeah.
And I always get asked, where did Rhode Island Reds get their dark red color from? Well, the story has it that they used a red Malay cockbird and crossed him on the resident just mongrel hens. And they noticed that the red pullets were laying eggs better and they were growing better bodies. And so those red colored birds soon became the most popular birds to own up there. It was a lot of market for those birds. And let's see, one of the early founders was Lester Tompkins. And this is a picture of some of Lester's birds here. He was in Concord, Massachusetts, but he worked a lot in making the Reds possible. And then later on, his son joined him, Lester Tompkins. This is some of his rose comb Reds. Reds come in 2-comb varieties, single comb and rose comb. And this is where Sue's birds all started with. It was from Mr. Tompkins. And then there was a gentleman by the name of Maurice Wallace that got birds from him. Maurice worked for Owen Poultry Farm, and he had them for a number of years. And then a lady up in South Georgia, well, I shouldn't say South Georgia, but up in Georgia, up around Atlanta, Miss Susie Donaldson, got Reds from Mr. Wallace. And she had them for a number of years. This is some of her birds back about 1919. And wow. You can begin to see that early type, brick shape that we still have today, relatively tight feathers, long horizontal backs that we strive for today. This is probably one of the nicest pictures of a Rhode Island Red male I have ever come across. And this is one of Miss Donaldson's birds. This was at the first prize Rhode Island Red cockerel out of the pen and from New York State Fair, September of 1932. Wow. And not too long after that, Mr. E.W. Reese got birds from Miss Donaldson, as did his somewhat breeding partner and his good friend Buddy Day. Now, Buddy actually bought the last of Miss Donaldson's Rhode Island Reds.
Wow.
This is a bird that is just impressed me from the day I first saw it. It's not the sharpest picture, but this is one of Dennis Meyer's birds. And Dennis got his start from Mr. Reese sometime in the 80s. And this is one that he produced. And I told him one time, man, that was the nicest bird I ever saw. He said, yeah, I wish I hadn't sold him.
Wow.
And then from Dennis, they went to another gentleman got some, and Sue eventually got some from him. This is one of Sue's birds. And you can see the same body type going through all these birds. Horizontal back, deep bodies, just a well put together bird.
Yeah.
These are not short-legged birds by any means, but they're not really long-legged. As Mr. East referred to it, they're well up in their carriage. And that's so important for good feather quality and for good reproduction.
Yeah. To give people a little understanding, a regular dinner plate, one of the upper legs, the drumstick, if you will go from side to side of that plate. That's how big they are.
Yeah, they've got some nice leg on them.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an image. A lot of folks ask, well, how big are they? Well, today they're bigger than what the ones back in the 60s and 70s and 80s were, and even into the 90s. These birds were only about 2 feet long, front to back. And I can remember the males I had could easily fit in a single large fowl coop with plenty of room. Didn't need a double coop. And then they got carried away with the tail length, got it a little bit long, and that's when they started to have to go to double coops. But they were trying to get the impression of body length through longer tails. That really never works. The females were only about 20 inches long, 14 inches high, and the males were about 15 and a half inches tall. And if you want some of these images, I'm going to put this slide presentation in the file section on our group so you can pick it up there. This shows you a color. One of the hardest things to get is a good wing on a Rhode Island Red. Now, the picture on the left is this is a bantam wing, and it's an immature red. You can see down at the bottom, it's still got a pointed primary feather. When all the tips of the feathers are rounded like those up above it, then the bird is mature. But that's really what you want it to look like. You want red on the upper edge of the primary feathers and on the lower edge of the secondary feathers. And that way, when the wing is folded, you don't see any black. It's all red. And image on the right gives you a little bit better example. But what I want to point out here is that the female's hackle feathers, the one on the very left, you should have a little row of black ticking on the bottom of that hackle. That's really hard to get, I'll be honest with you. You either get none or a lot of times you get too much. And if you've ever bred reds for very long, you know what I mean by too much and how hard it is to get. Well, one of the secrets to keeping a dark red color, and that's hard to do, but this second feather from the left, see that little black spot on there, dark spot? That's called smut. You don't want it in showbirds because they'll cut you for that. But I always tried to use males in the breeding pen that were free of excess black. And I would put one or two females in there that had just a little touch of smut, of just a few feathers on them that carried that bar smut. That the old timers used to say that the black fed the red color. It will help keep that color dark. The other thing to look for to help keep your color dark is the color of the feather shaft itself. The feather shaft should be really dark, rich red all the way to the skin. No tendency to go light. When you start getting a lighter color red, you probably got color color problems in the feather shaft. And the same way on black in the tails. You see some males that aren't bred very well, and after they get older, they start getting a little white in their tail. If you pay attention to those feather shafts and get those feather shafts in the tail, main tail feathers, black all the way to the skin, you won't have that problem. And you'll still maintain a good, rich red color. Okay, Carrie, that concludes my visual aid.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn it over to you and let you ask your questions, bud.
All right. The first question I have right here is from Rob. It says, has the breed conformation changed over time? If so, how? And was it better or worse?
The one change has been everything has been the same: long horizontal back, brick shape, whole 9 yards. But the angle of the tail has been decreased. It used to be 30 degrees on males, and it's been lowered to 20. And it used to be 20 degrees on females, and that's been lowered to 10 degrees.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
The smut in my pullets would be tighter feathered. They fix the color.
Yes.
All right. So a question that I have is, I have several that have to do with genetic traits. When breeding poultry, you taught me in the past that the comb traits primarily come from the hen. What other traits come from the hen primarily? So when you're looking for ideally breeding in a pair is probably one of the best ways to do it. So if you did not have a perfect pair, what would you look for in traits, from a hen that you would want to breed forward?
I would want the female to be fairly tight feathered. Reds today are getting too loosely feathered, and they're starting to look more like Orpingtons than reds should be.
Yes.
And when you come to color breeding, if I'm going to use excess black in a mating, I'm going to do it on the female side, not on the male side. And then, like you said, you pay attention to the females' heads, the comb. If you want a 5-point comb on your males, make sure your females have got 5 points. And you really have to look at the female's comb because red females don't have a very large comb, so you've got to look at it very closely. They can hide things like thumbprints, like side sprigs, all these little things you have to look at very, very closely. It's what I call learning to sweat the small stuff, because if you don't sweat the small stuff with reds, it can come back to bite you in a heartbeat.
Can I add up?
Yes, very much so.
What are some other traits that are primarily dominant in the hen?
In my line, okay, the line that I had and now have, I got more influence in type from the females than I did with the males. I don't know, Sue, if you've noticed that or not.
Yes.
But you see some reds being shown today that have a top line or top of the back that goes from the shoulders, it goes up to the tail, and that's not right. You want it level and horizontal.
Yeah.
A female has a lot of influence over that. The females has a lot of influence on, you see birds today, and this one just really makes me nuts, that have a hump in the middle of the back. That can be caused by 2 or 3 things. If you run your hand along the back and you feel a bump there, that's a skeletal deformity, and that's called a roach back, and that's a disqualification. But if you don't feel a bump and you still got the hump there in the feathers, then it's probably, I would look at the feather length. When it gets too long, I've seen them pop up a hump there. And also in the ratio of the feather fluff to the feather web. I'd like to keep my ratio to less than half. want a little bit more feather web than I do fluff in there. You start getting that feather, the fluff in those feathers. You get a lot of that. You start getting this coaching style feather, and it's, well, we all have probably seen coaching. They're very loose, puffy feathered birds, which is what we don't want in our reds, and it's a constant fight for us because there is coaching blood in our birds.
Mm-hmm.
They were part of the founding of the
So
creation of reds.
if there's a hump in the back, and you know, if you're somebody that, which you should be somebody that feels your birds and handles them regularly, if you feel that hump and you notice that hump, that probably should go into the crock pot pen, essentially.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You'd never want to breed that problem.
Yeah.
All right.
It's one of those problems that will get worse over time. It's you know, the old adage, the more you tolerate something, the longer you'll have it.
So as far as like the physical part of the bird, the stance, the legs, length, the flat back, the tail, the comb, the wide bodiness, that sort of stuff is a lot of what the traits from the hen that you're going to see in breeding, correct?
Yes. Males can also influence the width of body pretty well. I think in my birds, I would have to say that the male and the female have about equal influence on body capacity,
Okay.
but a little more influence from my females on body type, overall body type.
Okay. What about that color? You said that you would want a little bit of the black on the hen, but when we were talking about where the bird started, the deep red came from the cockbird. Is that what you typically would see when putting the pair together?
The red color came from the cockbird. It has been fine-tuned quite a lot over the years. They were not always as dark as the birds we have now.
Okay.
It's been with careful selective breeding, use of excess black, that they've been able to darken that color. And while we're on color, you know, a lot of folks refer to that as mahogany red.
Yeah.
Well, it's not mahogany. And I had somebody argue with me. He said, well, it's in the standard. I said, it's not in my standard. The standard calls for deep, dark, lustrous red. Mm-hmm. That's all it says.
Yeah, I've seen the birds, and that's definitely what they are.
When you start getting them too dark,
yeah,
I don't know what it is. When you get them too dark, you start losing egg production.
I can see that.
The black, it tends to want to become dominant, doesn't it?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So we have a question here that says, is there anything about the breed conformation that works against production capability as far as it relates to meat and eggs?
Not really, because that's what the breed was created to do in the first place.
I was going to say they were created as a dual purpose bird.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Probably better known as an egg layer. They don't have the depth of body that you see on a Plymouth Rock, but well, Sue can tell you, she's been processing some of her birds. There's a lot of meat on those birds.
Yes, there is. Yep. They're meant, you know, to for meat and for eggs and for hardiness, where they can go out and forage for themselves. And the bad part about it is that we've gone so much to the show bird and gotten away from the utility part of the bird. And I'm not talking hatchery. I'm talking what these birds were bred for. Right now, they're slow to mature, slow to produce eggs, and that's one thing that you have to watch when you're selecting next year's breeders. Who's laying the eggs first? You know, who's getting their body capacity in first? And those are the ones to choose for next year's breeders. But there again, they've got to make the type, they've got to make the color. Yeah. There's a lot of check boxes.
Yes, there is.
If I was going to select a breeder for next year, and I'm talking about hens right now. Mm-hmm. When would I want to see my first egg?
That's a loaded question, bud.
I know. But I mean, it's something it's an important part to me of keeping the whole reason the bird was originally created for the dual purpose. When would I want to see an egg first? And obviously I wouldn't want to hatch out a pullet egg. So at what size would I want to wait until the eggs were before I started hatching to make sure that I got that wide bodied bird?
I would want a female, to lay at about 7 months, between 7 and 8 months. I think if you're pushing them to lay much more than that, you're going to wind up shooting your overall growth and size in the foot. Much longer than that, you don't want that, because they're going to start eating you out of house and home. And reds will eat you out of house and home as it is.
Yes.
Without Sue's laughing because she knows it's true.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
Rip, the new group that you're working with now, when did they start laying? How old were they?
They were actually laying when I brought them home. How old were those birds, Sue?
You had some. You had some since then, right?
Yeah, but the ones I hatched were all males.
Ah.
They,
So
they were poor layers, I'll be honest
They're
with you.
never going to lay an egg. Yeah. How did you get all males?
Look, Jennifer and I was talking
If
about
anybody could do that, it would be me.
we were talking about one of the projects that she's got going on, and she said if she hatches 10, 9 of them are going to be males.
Yeah.
So,
Some years you get more males than you do females.
Yeah. This year I only got like 6 males. The rest I've got 22 females.
Well, I tell you what, you need to go buy a lottery ticket.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
because that is the poultry lottery right there.
Yes. And there's some nice birds. Yep. The interesting thing will be next year whenever I breed them back to their daddy, because the ones that really are showing the best are from the old bird, the original bird, Big Earl. And they're showing the flat back, the tail more up where it ought to be, width. They're not as heavy as the birds out of the other bird,
But
Ripalicious.
are they in standard weight?
Yes,
Okay.
every one of them. Yeah,
So there you go. No problem.
yeah. But
Breeding reds, everybody thinks, okay, you got a red bird with a black tail. Not a problem to breed a red bird with a black tail. Ho, ho, ho.
Terry, to answer your question, right? If everything is done right, you should see first egg at 6 months, 24 weeks. Okay. So
6 to 7 months for reds.
I would expect if they were grown out right, developed right. Now, the other thing is you should have ascending light, right? So if they're hitting 6 months in March or April, you're going to get that egg, at that 6 month mark. But it's going to be a little slower to bring them into sexual maturity this time of the year.
Well, you got people like me that like to hatch out in the wintertime.
Well, then you need a light program.
And Carrie, to answer your question on what size egg to set,
Yep.
Mr. Reese told me never set an egg that's smaller than large.
And so that would be 55-ish grams. Something like that.
58, but
58.
Close enough. Yeah. I would think 58 to 65 grams. You can do just as bad if your egg size is too large.
Yes.
Right? So you need a tight window on your egg size, and breeders don't do that, which is frustrating for me. But
I never understood that. They want big eggs, but they don't ever realize you can get them too big at the same time.
Right.
It's a double-edged sword.
You really want large and extra large only, or just at the upper end of medium for some breeds is actually proven to have the best hatch rate. So,
well, I know Mandy has a gram scale out in her barn, and she weighs every egg before it goes in the incubator, before she even preps it.
That's what Mr. Reese did.
You realize Mandy's a unicorn, right?
Yeah.
I
say it.
mean,
Real.
I
Real.
understand that not everybody does that, but I mean, Jennifer, she and I have been working on another type of bird, and you know, we're
Well, I have a gram scale and I weigh
you know,
eggs. So.
yeah, we're gramming it out.
So Jeff, what would be too large of an egg?
Yeah.
Yeah, when you start pushing over that 65, 66 grams, now, and it depends on the layer, right? Because believe it or not, some breeds were never designed or never bred to have an extra large or jumbo egg. Meanwhile, some breeds, you know, they do their best at extra large and jumbo. So, you know, it's not always a perfect number, but I would say 55 to 65 is your optimum window for hatching eggs. I mean,
And
others will hatch, but I think
Yeah.
you're gonna bring out genetics that you don't really want to bring forward. So,
and Jennifer, you start getting a lot of double yolk eggs, then your egg size is probably getting too big because those things are, well, we all know they're not going to hatch.
No, I don't set double yolk eggs.
No, and you know, I tested that theory because when I first got the reds that I have, I mean, I was excited. Beautiful birds. I got them from a great person that does really well with them. And Sue just gonna sit there and smile.
She's good at that.
Yeah, but you know, I was excited. I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna hatch everything and see what happens." But what I did do is I noted the size of the egg and note how, like, I grouped them in when I put them in the hatcher, so I would know roughly what size. And you know, I call it the peep test. When you come out of the hatcher, when you give the bird the peep test, the ones that were below that 55 gram weight, they failed. You know, and so they weren't going to be a wide bodied bird, or I was going to have to do a lot to get them there because they were struggling. And so that's why I guess I learned that lesson the hard way, to wait. You know, when you're excited, it's really hard to wait about anything because, you know, yes, we're all adults, but when it comes to poultry, we're little kids.
Yes.
When it comes to getting excited.
Amen.
So yeah, I did that, and I noticed that. My next question is going to be for Sue first, and then somebody wants to hear it from Rip too. But Sue, what made you decide to show Rhode Island Reds? What attracted you to that breed?
Well, first thing is the gentleness of the bird. They're like big puppy dogs. And the fact that whenever the sun hits them out on the green grass, there's not a prettier sight in the world. And people would ask me, what are you spraying them with? I don't spray them with anything. Well, what are you washing them with? Well, all I did was wash his butt and his legs. You know, I didn't wash the body of the bird. The body of the bird's natural. And that shininess, the brilliance that is in those feathers is natural to that breed. They're showstoppers to me.
Rip, what got you started to that breed?
Oh, when I first started showing, I was really into buff coachings, large fowl. And I soon decided you had to be a really good laundry operator to show those things. And I said, man, I think I'll pass on those. And then I got into Bantam Wyandottes. And I was at a show, first show I went to, and they talked me into clerking for an old judge by the name of Bob James. And Bob was a hoot and a half. But when he got to the Rhode Island Reds, and I had never paid a nickel's worth of attention to Rhode Island Reds, I was kind of like Sue. I was dumbfounded. You know, I'd never seen a bird quite like that. And Rhode Island Red to me was those little orange things you got from the hatcheries.
That chase you across the yard.
That's right. With death in their eyes. But I really came to love them real fast, and I ditched everything else and switched over to Reds.
I can see that, and when my granddaddy, when he had them, he had some that were pretty and dark. And when I first decided that I wanted some, I just looked for the best ones I could. And I looked at a lot of hatcheries, and that was before I even found the Rhode Island Red Club. And that was not the bird that I was used to. And, the best thing that I found locally was still probably a 5 to 8 year project. And, that's actually how Rip and I met, was when I was trying to figure out that. And, he basically told me that I had something that went really well in a crock pot, and I needed to hatch out everything I could and cull hard. And
I was nicer about it than Emmett Rachel's would have been. He just tell you to take that bird and mix him with 16 grains of rice and have a meal.
Well, I mean, essentially, when the more I've learned about it, the more you can either do that and cull hard, because Jennifer and I, we talk about vicious culling and ruthless culling. You either cull really, really hard, or you start with a great foundation stock. Jennifer, you got questions? You look like you have questions.
I do have a question about color. So if the color were to start lightening on your bird, would you pick more of that black ticking you were talking about in the hackle feathers to start darkening it back up?
Jennifer, first thing I would do would be to check the feather shaft color. Okay. And you want to get that as dark as you can. The second thing I would do, and like I said, I always tried to keep 1 or 2 females in each breed pen that had just a few smutty feathers across their back. No more than maybe 10 or 12 all over the whole bird. And that was, but you don't use excess black on both sides of the mating. Okay. You use it. I found it worked best with my reds if I used excess black through the females and used clean males. In other words, males that did not have any excess black to them.
Can I say one more thing about having the reds?
Yeah.
Rip reached out to me over a picture of a bird I posted, I guess, on Facebook, and said, where'd you get these birds? And I told him. And then he sent me a message outlining that he knew these birds. He knew where they came from. He knew the history of them. And he started telling me that. And I had to sit down. I had to have a moment of catch my breath, because I had no clue. The way I got these birds was kind of circumspect, and I was not informed on any of their background. And when he told me where they came from and their history, well, he admitted he cried a little bit, and I did too. It was overwhelming to find out that they were, went back to the foundation of the bird itself. It's a little overwhelming in a person's head.
Yeah. I thought that line of birds was long gone. I had given up any hope whatsoever of finding any.
Yeah.
And the line of birds you have is one of the purest, most unadulterated lines of Rhode Island Reds that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
There may be others. I'm just not aware of them.
Yeah. Well,
but I know Ms. Donaldson, Mr. Reese, Buddy Day.
They line bred them for like 30 years, both of them.
Longer than that. Mr. Reese had them 80 years.
Wow.
But they never brought in the outside blood to speak of.
Right. Yeah.
And with that in mind, every time somebody I see in these groups, people are like, I'm looking for fresh blood for my birds.
Mm-hmm.
My first question is why?
Yeah.
What are you trying to fix?
Right.
Because unless you bring in something that's like that, like showstopper, show bird, you could be throwing in a wrench and having to start completely over, messing up what you have done. So,
excuse me, I'm sorry.
No.
If you ever find yourself feeling that way, that you absolutely got to bring in unrelated blood, my suggestion is get it from a related line. In other words, find somebody else that has a line of birds that you have and get one from them that has the qualities you want.
Right.
That way you won't be starting over.
Right. Exactly right.
People get scared when they've been line breeding and all of a sudden they get a hatch that is completely ugly and a whole lot of defects all of a sudden. And instead of getting scared and getting new blood, they need to push through that because on the other side is a lot purer line. Okay. And they don't understand that. So they're headed the right direction. They just don't know it. Okay. Yeah. And, so you pick through the uglies and, you breed again. Right. Yeah. And then the next generation, a lot of those defects will be gone if you can get through that one or two really ugly generations.
Ruthless culling.
Well, Jeff,
new blood is always a mistake.
Yeah. I've had that happen to me. And when I stopped and thought about it and really evaluated the birds, it was not so much the bird's fault, is that I hadn't put the best birds that were best matched together as breeders.
Yeah.
So the fault was actually my fault and not the bird's fault.
You have the bloodlines. The bloodlines are already there. You know that you have the bloodlines. You just have to push through that, that mistake or that ugly. Yeah. And, there's good stuff on the other side. But every time whenever you bring in new blood, you're starting over. People don't understand. You are starting over. Okay. And you don't know what you're bringing in. I don't care how good the breeder is or the person is or whatever, or how many ribbons they got.
Right.
You don't know what you're bringing in. You know what you own, but you don't know what you're buying.
A good example of that is my hatch this year. I've got pullets that are coming up that are outstanding, but every male that I hatched he's crock pot, and I started to worry, and then I thought, no, I've got the birds here still on the property that produced Ripalicious. So, it's there. It's just me figuring out the puzzle pieces to who goes to with who.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mr. Reese had a saying, always keep your blueprints.
Yeah. Yep.
And you're right.
My original birds are in the back. They're my egg layers. And I keep all my breeders separate up on the hill. And if I ever screw up on the hill, I just go shopping in my backyard.
There you go.
Yep.
Rip, a while ago you made mention about the feathers, and we were talking about the blacking on the feathers and that kind of stuff. Shaggy on YouTube wants to know, how hard should the feathers be?
Shaggy, I would want feathers on a red to be somewhere between the look of the feathers on a Leghorn and maybe an Orpington, something like that. Somewhere in between those. You want it tight, not real tight. You don't want it real loose either.
Yeah. And because of the red color, they're prone to dry out. So
yes. That's why when you're conditioning birds, it's a good idea to keep a squirt bottle of water.
Yeah.
Over there where you condition it, go by once or twice a day, just
or let them out.
Give them
let
a little
them out
mist
in the rain.
Yep.
So for me in the summertime, I listen to Jeff, even though sometimes he thinks that I don't listen to him. I'm sure.
Often you don't.
Well, I went through, Jennifer has got me addicted to Temu. And
oh no.
So I was on Temu one day, and one of their, flash sales that they do that's almost as bad as going into a big box store and you hearing the chick sound. It was misters, for your deck, and it's like the tube with the fittings, the T fittings where you can screw in the misters. And I was like, well, Jeff always says that this is good in the summertime to help keep them cool. And they talk about doing it to keep the feathers moist, and it helps them stay healthy and this, that, and the other. So now in all of my breeding pens, I've got misters, and they'll cut on about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'll cut off about 3. Plenty of time to dry up before the sun goes down. I always got wind. A lot of mine have fans in them to dry the ground, so I don't have to worry about that. But it really does make a difference on their feathers.
Mm-hmm.
Big difference.
Yep.
Let's see. Tim also says that he bred reds for 25 years. It can be great breed, but very challenging.
Yes.
I agree.
So many people don't understand just how challenging reds can be.
Mm-hmm.
I'd put them right up there with.
That goes for anything that you're going to be detail orientated about.
Yeah. Well, when you're breeding birds, you got to be detailed. You got to pay attention to the details, because it'll bite you if you don't.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And you can find yourself running down a rabbit hole really quick.
Mm-hmm.
Done that.
Yep. And you can't just focus on one thing. You got to have.
No.
It's the whole. There's 3 pages of check boxes. So,
But Sue, I want to add one thing onto that. You're right.
Mhm.
You can't focus on just one thing.
right.
But when you try to correct a problem, when you're first starting out, I would focus on one problem to try to
Yep.
correct it at a time.
Yep.
If you try to correct 5 or 6, it'll drive you nuts. You won't get there.
Right. Right.
And you got to look today, tomorrow, and 2 years from now.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. This next question is, Jeff, have you ever shown birds? Have you ever been a show bird person?
No.
All right. So this
No.
question is going to be, we'll go from left to right. We'll start with Jennifer. We'll let her answer, and then Sue, and then we'll let Rip answer this question. How do you house your show birds and keep them show ready? And I think people are going to be really surprised at how this question is answered.
If we're talking about like right before the show, is that what we're talking about?
Yep. How do you house your show birds and keep them ready for a show? So, like, I would think that's, if you're going to the Ohio National in a couple of weeks, from now to then, what are you doing with that bird?
I have soft feathered birds, so I would wash them like 10, 12 days in advance. And then I set the whole alleyway of my barn with drop pins on the floor and I just dump the shavings over the top and keep them in there. And every day, 14 times a day, you got to go by there and clean out the shavings, dump more in there, and make sure they're not close enough that they're fighting between the cages. And I have had one jump up and hung himself the day before a show. So now I lay stuff on top of the cages to keep them from doing that again. So it's a learning process all the way up until that morning.
All right. Sue, how do you and I'm laughing because I have a clue where you're going with this. But how do you house your show birds and keep them show ready?
Well, I try to keep their pens as clean as possible year round.
Right.
And some days I do well and other days I don't. But the 2 birds that won for me the best, one was picked off the ground the morning of the show, or the morning before I left to go to the show. So she was not even washed. And the other bird had his butt and legs washed and taken. So I just, I feed them good. I take care of them. They get outside. They get on green grass. They have fresh air. they're chickens. They do what they want to do, but I just try clean water, clean fresh food, but I don't put them in conditioning pens. I just don't. They stay with everybody else, and
You let your chickens chicken.
I let my chickens chicken. The one girl that won Knoxville in 21, I went out there to load up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and she was standing there, and I thought, well, you look pretty good. So I just picked her up and checked her bottom, make sure she didn't have bugs, threw her in a box, and away we went. And she won the whole show. Or she won champion large fowl. I won't say she won the whole show, but it definitely shocked me because I didn't think anybody pay any attention to those Krivker. So, but they did. They did. Yep.
What about you, Rip? How do you house your show birds?
I'm a lot like Sue. Leave them outside, let them run around, let them be chickens.
Yeah.
Yep.
I can honestly say I have never washed a Rhode Island Red to take it to a show, other than to wipe off the face and wipe off the feet and legs.
Make sure the butt's clean.
Just never needed it, you know. Wipe them down with a silk cloth. That'll get the dust off of them. Shine them up a little bit.
Yep.
Rub a little of my comb dressing on their face and wattles and comb, and that's real simple to make. It's 50% alcohol and 50% olive oil.
Yeah.
Shake it up and rub it on there. The alcohol helps redden the comb, and the olive oil makes it shine.
Yeah.
And do the same thing. Use the same thing on the feet and legs too.
Yeah.
But if
that's
I'm going
good.
all out to condition a bird, I'll put it in a show coop, bring it inside for about 10 days or so, and I want to get it used to showing against strange birds. So I'll shuffle or order the birds around. I don't every day. I'm moving them around. I play a radio in there, get them used to strange sounds. I even have some audio that I recorded at a show, so that's usually what I play. Just common sense stuff. Don't overthink it.
Yeah.
This is not a breed that requires a lot of primping and carrying on with them.
Yeah, we're not doing. It's not table dancers.
No.
Let's see here.
I'm trying to get that image out of my head now.
Yeah, Lordy.
Tim says type has been the most challenging. Most have lost the true brick shape. That is true.
Amen, Tim.
Yeah.
Let's see. We only have some quail and small backyard mixed flock of chickens, trying to learn as much as possible and convince the better half that we need some farmland. I mean, I hate to say it, but you don't need a lot of land.
I have 1 acre.
You just gotta have your pens. And if you don't have a lot of land to have big pens, you just got to work extra hard to condition your pens.
Yeah.
And keep them clean.
Keep them clean.
Honestly, as far as raising birds and getting them in good shape and good condition, reds are pretty easy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Good feed, good management, good water. You're good to go.
Yeah.
Let's see. Sue and Rip, do you track egg numbers, and are you tracking individual matings?
Yes and yes.
No and no. But
Sue's the rebel.
I am.
I know.
But honestly, I can look at some of my females and I know exactly which male they came out of and real close to which female they came out of because I have a limited amount of birds. I have more now because I hatched a lot. But no, Tim, this spring Sue's going to be a better manager. Yes. Yep.
Sue has a better memory than I do. I can't do that.
Well, I can tell by looking at them. They each have their own kind of little quirky thing. Each of my adult females.
See, back in the day, Sue, I had 10 breeding pens.
Yeah.
So
wow.
I just there's no way I could keep track of that with my feeble brain.
Yeah. Yeah. One day. One day.
How do you manage a trip to the Ohio National or somewhere where you drive an extended period of time? How often would you stop and tend to your birds or do whatever and then start again?
Coming from Oklahoma, it was almost between 14 and 16 hours. And we stopped, to use the bathroom, eat lunch, and do that. But they rode in extra large show boxes where they had plenty of room to stand up, move around, or dog kennel, the great big dog kennel things. And they had food and water inside the dog kennels, so they had room to move around. They made the trip better than I did.
Yes, every time. I do it a little bit different than Sue.
Yeah.
I don't use a big box to carry the birds in, but they do have feed and water available. All I want them to be able to do is stand up and sit down. Because when
Yeah.
birds start turning around in some of those boxes is when they start ruining
Yeah.
tail feathers.
Yeah.
Tearing up feathers. So I guess for that, you would either have a box that they can fit in, that they can stand up and sit down,
Mm-hmm.
or have something huge where they have more than enough room to move around so they don't damage any of their feathers or anything like that.
Yeah, my show boxes are 10 inches wide and about 20 inches tall.
All right. Now, this next question is one that is loaded anytime you ask any poultry keeper this question. And to be honest, a lot of them don't know the actual answer. How many do you have at one time? And now I'm sure we all know exactly how many pens and coops we have. But how many do you have at one time? Jennifer just sitting there like, oh, don't call on me for that.
I notice she's avoiding eye contact.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that, if your feed is delivered on a pallet, the number's a little high, but you don't know.
I would have 28 pens. I think.
I would hatch upwards of 700 or 800 birds a year.
Wow.
But I was selling a lot of baby chicks. I didn't keep that many. I would keep 200, maybe 300 birds.
Wow.
Because I also sold a lot of adult birds. I probably, of my birds that I wanted to keep, 50 or less.
Yeah.
At the most.
Yeah.
You have to be just absolutely ruthless in culling. Mm-hmm. Not just reds, but any breed.
Mm-hmm.
If you need to weed down to about 10%. Those are going to be your top birds. Get rid of everything. Get rid of the other 90%. And keep 10%.
Yeah,
it's a good rule of thumb.
Yeah,
and I mean, what your definition of ruthless culling and what's a keeper. Somebody else is maybe a lot more relaxed. If we're talking about reds and mine are more tan than red, and somebody else has a real red, one of their culls may be what puts more red into your birds.
Carrie, there's no doubt about it. The longer you have birds, the closer you cull.
Mm-hmm.
We'd like to interject here, though. The more pens and coops you have lets you spread them out more. And it ebbs and flows. So while I have a bunch of pens, come January, probably 60, 70% of them will be empty.
Mm-hmm.
You sure don't want to crowd them.
You got breeders, you got grow outs, then you'll have culls, and then you'll be back down to just breeders again. Yeah. So just because you have a bunch of coops and pens doesn't mean that there's birds in all of them all the time.
Right.
I mean, I've got 3 empty breeding pens and an empty 10 by 20.
Mm-hmm.
I've got empty too.
Yep. You're ready to start hatching.
I just started saying, y'all need to put eggs in the incubator if you got that much space. Come on.
No.
So what I got to, I'm going to rotate my pens because I'm going to clean them out, do everything, condition the pens. And I am a wintertime hatcher. I have some lighting that I've started my lighting program about a month ago because I like to, I like that 16-hour day for my birds, not for me. But, once the day starts shortening, I like to give them a break until they're through the molt. And then I stretch that day back out roughly 30 minutes a week. And, if you live anywhere near me right now, about 3:30 in the morning, you're going to hear a bunch of roosters crow. That's just, it's starting to get dark at 5 o'clock now. We're an hour and a half away from dark. So I like for my lights to go off about an hour or so before dark, right when I'm feeding them, because I like for the roosting process to be as natural as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And Jeff, there you go again. That's me listening to you. That's Jeff got me on lighting, and he taught me a few things about lighting, and then that rabbit hole happened, and I traveled down it, and I learned about the blues and the reds and what does better for this and what does better for that, and you can get something to work all across the line, and how many kelvins does it need to be? All that stuff is a whole new rabbit hole that you can go down.
You need to repost that. I think people need a reminder as the days are getting shorter.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah.
I can do that.
Yep.
Let's see. Oh, here's another question that I've had, because y'all, when y'all travel long distances, you've got food and water in with your birds. I don't, because I'm afraid of making a mess, and I also have a truck that has a little stiffer suspension. So how do you keep birds with water when you're driving?
Carrie, my feed and water is not in with the birds. Okay. It's outside of the area that they are in.
Gotcha.
I have little wooden dowels.
Yeah.
About
They poke
they
their
can
heads
get their
out.
heads through. And then I have a little tray out there that has like little Dixie cups with
Mhm.
feed and water.
Yep.
No mess.
Yep.
What about you, Jennifer?
Mine, I don't travel that far. I don't go that far from home. So I actually use moving boxes, cardboard boxes, and we have a 2-inch hole saw, and we drill holes on all 4 sides at the top, and we keep them in the dark cardboard. I think the farthest they've gone is 3 hours, and so I don't feed or water them. We leave so early, and then I feed them in the show coop before we leave, and they've got water that whole time too. So, and they're fine on the way home. An ideal situation is I sell the birds while I'm there, and I don't come home with any.
See, y'all are lucky. You live relatively close to shows. My
Yes.
closest show is about 3 hours away.
Yeah.
And I just about have to pack a lunch to get there.
Well, I think it's a rule that every time I drive through Ohio, I have to bring birds home with me. My wife knows that I'm going to Ohio in a few weeks, and she asked me point blank. She's like, "What are you bringing back?"
What?
And I was like, "I don't know."
My
But-
wife does not ask me that. I just get
think
admonished, don't bring home anything that eats.
you know, I think mine is curious because I'd like to have an emu.
Oh, Lord.
I mean, I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, you're going on the dark side, Gary.
You ain't
Don't
right.
do it. Don't do
You
it.
ain't right.
Look,
Don't do
okay, so I
Oh,
want
yeah.
one to keep stuff away. A couple of my kids have got to where they like coming back into my chicken yard because they're not scared of any of my chickens. And that's my place.
Go get you a hatchery red male or a hatchery legged male, and he will keep them out.
Or
I thought
couple
about a
game.
goose. I thought
Yeah.
about geese.
Yep.
Now, game, they're not scared of game.
Hmm.
Now I have one or two that of my games that don't like anybody but me, and they won't go in those pens. But yeah, they start coming back there. So if I could free range like an emu or geese,
You're just trying to keep your kids out of the coop?
that's my place.
Hey, I've got a big old coaching I'll give you. He'll keep everybody out of there.
That's right. I need next time I come by there, I need to see if me and him can get along. Because if me and him can get along, but he don't like anybody else,
He don't like anybody.
I've got a little black Spanish Bantam that will put the fear of God in anybody.
Can I let it free range?
You can have him. Yeah. If
'Cause,
I can catch him.
I mean, I've got some that I can't. I haven't had leghorns in a year, but I have two that are free range, and sometimes I'll see them in the trees behind the house at night, and sometimes I may not see them for weeks. You know, I think that a raccoon got them, and then they come back. What type of water cups do you recommend using at the shows? Now, me personally, when I think of this, I'm almost tempted to get a couple of those little white cups because I got some of the same type cages that they use at those shows just for conditioning. Because a wise man in the top right corner told me that you put your cups on the side to get the birds used to standing sideways.
Yep.
And you make it as much like a show as possible to lower their stress so they'll do their best.
Right.
Which is why he has recorded audio of a show and he has those same type coops and stuff like that. So I would think when conditioning for a show, I would use exactly what they're using in the shows.
Yeah.
Is those just red paper cups, right?
Yeah.
I mean, white ones.
The problem with those paper cups, red males can have big combs on them, and they can have a hard time getting water out of them.
Yeah.
So what I do is I use the 1 pint. They're heavy black plastic, and they'll hang right on the wire.
Yeah.
Cage cups. That's the
cage
word you're looking
cups.
for,
Made
cage
specifically
cups.
for that. And I just take enough when I leave. I just put some in the car, take them to the show, and I use them. So they're used to eating out of. They're eating out of the same thing, drinking out of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was something I learned at my first show. You take a jug of water with you because otherwise you make a lot of trips to the bathroom to get water for your birds.
Yep.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And put electrolytes in it for them too.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, here's a suggestion for me. Instead of an emu, get a donkey.
Get a mini donkey, yeah.
Son, you just gone off the deep end tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because your kids will be out there riding that donkey.
Yeah. No kidding.
Yeah,
I would get a big old mean. You only get one goose. If you get a pair, it don't work.
Yeah.
You have one single gander.
Yep.
You want the biggest, ugliest one you can find. Okay?
Yep.
So while I'm at Ohio, I go out to the sale barn.
No. No.
And I find one so I can bring something back from Ohio.
You don't bring anything home from a sale.
Yeah.
Quit being stupid.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't put it in my yard for at least 30 to 45 days.
Yeah.
I still wouldn't bring it home. You don't know if you're bringing mites home. You don't know if you're bringing MG home. You don't know if you're bringing you don't know what.
That is true.
Okay.
Yeah.
There ain't a chance in hell I'm bringing a bird home from a sale. Okay. Sorry.
And
I ain't doing it.
there's
Fair
got to
enough.
be somebody local around you that raises geese. So, and they're always wanting to get rid of extra drakes.
Yep.
So,
I believe that is all the questions that we have.
I was just fixing to ask you that because we got
We're at
somewhat
time.
off track.
Yeah.
Talking
But-
about emus.
We're all
Anyway,
right. It was good conversation.
Yes.
Sue, do you have anything you want to add to it?
Oh, I'm good. I'm good.
Jennifer?
Great
I'm good.
conversation.
Had a good time.
Carrie?
I'm good.
I think Jeff's about to nod off, so I'll assume he's good. No, I'm just kidding. Anything else,
I'm
Jeff?
good. I'm good.
Okay.
I'm good.
All right.
But I did
Well-
like Rob's last comment. You got to put it up there. There is no kids going to be riding Hedge donkey.
Oh, mercy, mercy, mercy.
Man.
Well, folks, we appreciate you joining us tonight. I have had a lot of fun doing this show. I think we've covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
If you have any
We
more
didn't even talk about
Rhode Island
turkeys.
Reds- I'm sorry, what, Carrie?
We didn't even talk about the red turkeys.
No.
Oh,
The subject
that's-
was about Rhode Island Reds, wasn't it?
I said
Yeah, not
reds.
bourbon Reds, Rhode Island Reds. Give it a program. I totally forgot what I was going to say now. So, folks, thanks for watching. We'll be
Thank
back in 2 weeks.